I mean,
So you are a conservative now.
Well, separate the art from the artist. We've talked about this many times on the podcast before. Morrissey, great politics, great art, and so on and so forth.
So you're putting Bill O'Reilly with Morrissey, huh?
Milan ou Tripoli, Vilnius ou Benghazi, Paris, Moscou, on fait le boonga, boonga. Bangkok ou Bogota, Le Caire ou Jakarta, Gustavia, on fait le boonga, boonga.
hello, welcome back. It's the end of the month, and it's BungaCast, still very much being the global politics podcast at the end of history. I'm still Alex Hochuli in São Paulo, Brazil. George Hoare is still George Hoare, still in London.
Yes.
Hello, George.
And remain myself as much as anyone can, in the sense of like identity. Is it stable? Is it changing?
Are you being true to yourself?
Can you step in the same river twice? Can the same person step in a river twice? But yeah, I mean, as far as I know, I'm still am myself.
And
Thanks for asking.
Ryan Zickgraf, contributing editor and man bereft of any sort of identity crisis, I believe. Hello, Ryan.
Oh, yeah. I'm suffering a little bit of an identity crisis right now, but who isn't?
Right. Oh, okay. We can talk about that as we work our way through. If we run out of
We are going to be
politics
talking
things,
about
yeah.
identity politics in crisis, sort of.
That is
Yes,
true.
almost.
Nice, interesting, sort of. Or at least left-wing identity politics in crisis. The right-wing ones seems to be full steam ahead, but we can maybe touch on this. We're going to be talking about, we're going to be dealing with your listener questions, which we didn't have a chance to do last time round at the end of the month. So we're going to be doing that, a kind of bumper session. But before that, we're going to be dealing with, I guess the question is how the Democrats are responding to MAGA and Trump. Just to set this up, I'm going to just take one tweet that I found, but I think it's fairly sums things up in a nice way. Kim.com, who I think is Danish and lives in New Zealand, so it's not exactly someone, a spokesman for the American people in a direct sense, but he tweeted just this past week, "This is what you were promised. 1. Immediately bring prices down. 2. Release all Epstein files. 3. Immediately end war in Ukraine. 4. Mass deportation of illegals. 5. No more foreign wars." Just a reminder. So if we take that as a faithful account of what Trump indeed promised, how is Trump doing on those things? Immediately bring prices down? No, absolutely not. Release all Epstein files? Belatedly, the Republicans have agreed to that, and we'll see where that ends up. Immediately end war in Ukraine? Well, there's this new deal on the table, blah, 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 but war has not ended in Ukraine. Mass deportation of illegals? Yes, that's happening. No more foreign wars? Not exactly, as he's threatening to invade Venezuela.
I think the important thing about that fifth one is the punctuation, because it could be no more foreign wars, or it could be no, comma, more foreign wars, exclamation mark. You've got to be careful.
Right, indeed. I mean, this is obviously, I'm just using this one tweet, but maybe Trump had punctuation presumed in what he was saying, and it was unclear. And he indeed works, as many politicians do, with that sort of creative ambiguity. But anyway, as a consequence, right? I think we assumed at the beginning of the year, and I think we made comments to this effect at the beginning of the year on this podcast, that Trump and MAGA and then Trump's return would kind of, to a certain extent, definitively shift the center of political gravity in the U.S. It had already happened after Trump's first term, insofar as Biden's infrastructure bills were themselves a response to kind of Trumpian demands or the sort of expectations and hopes amongst the people that led Trump into the presidency. So we expected this to continue happening, but now the Democrats have a bit of wind in their sails and are at the same time, as Ryan tells us in two pieces, trying to move beyond what they have become. So I'm just going to highlight the two articles that Ryan has written, and you can find the link in the show notes. They're both very good. I encourage you to read them. So one is from the new issue of Damage, the print issue 5 on the pre-political, and the title is the not that pre-political, but rather political, "Can the Democrats Escape the Shadow of Woke?" And then in UnHerd, a piece from the beginning of November, Inside the Democratic Identity Crisis. And together, these pieces, I think, give us some sense of what the Democrats are trying to do to respond to MAGA, but also to respond to maybe what they see as an opportunity in the fact that Trump's approval ratings are very low. So I guess I should bring Ryan in here. Is what you call big woke dying?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what's interesting is that because of like some of the overreach of Trump, that there's a talk of dark woke, we're getting a maybe woke 2.0 in some sense. But
sorry, just to jump, what is dark woke for some of our less terminally online listeners? And also, I think I know what it is, but if I had to give a definition, there's at least a 50% chance I would get it a bit wrong. What is dark woke?
Well, I guess there's a sense that, the original woke form, if we're talking like, this vague movement, social media driven identity politics from like 2016 to, 2024 was kind of polite, kind of, we should address women's issues. We should, think about reparations. Let's pass some good reform, some laws. And dark woke is sort of like the vigilante, the Batman, maybe we should get our guns and we're going to be really nasty. I guess it could be like dirtbag wokeism in some sense. Like we have to stop being polite and just really being hard-edged woke. Yeah.
But so it's the same progressive, often identitarian concerns, but with a supposedly harder edge.
Exactly. Yeah. There's some people, like there is statistics that actually show that Democrats are arming at higher rates than anybody right now. Right. And I've seen some leftists that are wearing like, I don't know, machine gun imagery on their shirts. And they're like, at least, I guess, if you want to say virtue signaling that they're harder edged, then yeah, that's true. This is, again, online stuff. So it's about presenting woke as this, we're not going to take it anymore,
Right. I mean, people joked all through the woke era that there was a kind of a fusion between, centrist neoliberalism and Maoism in the form of woke. And I guess this is just trying to live up to that in a kind of quite literal way. But you kind of enumerate ways in which big woke is dying, right? So the PMC, which carries woke, are the section of society that has been the home of woke, are in trouble due to AI, right? Lots of white collar jobs being lost and so on. Universities have been attacked by Trump. The media is in trouble. Hollywood is dying, and Silicon Valley, which would have been the other final wing, and certainly with a degree of institutional power and economic power, has gone to the right. So, I mean, I think that's useful because instead of just talking about it in terms of, free floating stuff that you see online and how much less of it you might see, which of course is determined by the algorithm, which itself, if you're talking about X, you don't see the woke stuff anymore, but that's in part because a lot of it is over on Blue Sky and Elon Musk has gotten rid of it on X. So, that isn't necessarily a reliable indicator as to the temper of the times or indeed to the institutionalization or otherwise of wokeness. But I think talking about it in these terms gives a little bit more of a firm grounding.
Yeah. And, I think like say with the media itself, what we call the mainstream media, which sort of, became a sort of Democratic Party media in a lot of ways. They've lost a lot of their power. I think one big takeaway from the 2024 election was that the sort of celebrity Hollywood mainstream media was beaten. The media in Hollywood was aligned around Harris, and they lost. And I think there's a greater recognition that, people are talking about the manosphere being this new sphere of influence, but really it's sort of like this loose coalition or even just random YouTubers, TikTok, podcasts, all these sort of things that tended to go pro-Trump. And it was just more evidence that the big woke is just doesn't have its power anymore, and the Democrats now are saying, let's try to figure something else out.
Yeah. So like, I guess we'll get onto that in just a second. I mean,
Yeah, so
George, I don't know if you.
Yeah, no, I guess my question is like the big woke, the big bit of woke then, is that the kind of the home in the Democratic Party? Because it doesn't seem to me quite so clear that all of the things which those kind of 5 things, they necessarily, mean that woke as an ideology, if it is a thin ideology or whatever, that would actually mean it kind of goes away. For example, like PMC in trouble due to AI. Well, that could lead to, as we were talking about earlier, like a hardening, hard woke or like dark woke or dirtbag woke, whatever. But particularly, I like hard woke. I think that's like the hard left or the hard right. Anyway, but yeah, I guess my question is sort of is the kind of the question here more about the influence of hyperliberalism on the Democratic Party? Because I think that's maybe a slightly different question, but it's also an important one.
Well, I think that a lot of the Democratic, not only like the money, I mean, because you had these donor networks and you had these NGOs, which supplied a lot of financial base and the donor base, and then sort of the ideas behind a lot of Democratic policy and its structure. And these groups kind of went hand in hand. Like there was a lot of crossover. In the damage piece, I mentioned near Tandon, who was in a Democratic Party think tank, and a lot of the people in near Tandon's NGO were involved deeply into the Democratic Party. So it wasn't as formal, it wasn't like how Trump with Project 2025, and you had these, oh gosh, what's his group? What's the Project 2025 group called?
Heritage
Foundation, where Trump ended up hiring a lot of Heritage Foundation people and putting it like in his administration. There was some of that with the Biden administration, but it ended up being sort of a lot of BlackRock people as well. But there was a lot of back and forth where political consultants, the media, the groups like the Justice Democrats, and all of these progressive NGOs were all kind of together, both online and off. And I think that finally, because of like the 2024 election, that the Democrats were like, oh, right. A lot of these, I guess what you would say, woke policies are incredibly unpopular and is on our polling really poorly. So we have to sort of counter from that.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess if you're going to evaluate, I mean, I think peak woke has obviously been passed, and it obviously prompts a question of kind of what you're exactly talking about, right? Because there's a lot of it which was like a hysterical sort of badgering of people, cancel culture, and so on, which was a kind of a form of doing quote unquote politics, which has probably no longer happens under the kind of progressive identity terms, but maybe the right has done some of it, the kind of right's own kind of cancel culture stuff. The sort of ideas around post, like a decolonialization, in whatever, intersectionality and so on, will persist obviously within like humanities academic departments. But that doesn't mean that it's that much out in the public, or that big media organizations are using that as a means of inspiration for their cultural products or ways of discussing things, or like have that be their agenda in terms of reporting on politics. So I guess we can, and like the ideal subject of wokeness, the victim crusader, that probably persists and exists now in different elements of the political spectrum. Indeed, everybody more or less buys into the victim crusader as the ideal subject of politics. So it's kind of, I guess woke has just been much more generalized in many of its forms, even if some of the kind of more properly ideological aspect of it in terms of having stuff that people write books about, let's say, that stuff kind of has been shoved off and probably just will persist in academia.
Yeah, but I think the key thing is that Democratic politicians are no longer. I mean, I was there in 2019 for the Democratic primary. I went to the Iowa State Fair back when it was like a key thing for people running for president. And you had everybody, every single candidate from Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, all talking about maybe not abolishing the police, but sort of de-emphasizing them. And they were using terms like Latinx. They were, they were talking in a certain way that, was sort of like the peak of woke's power. But Harris didn't even really talk that way. Like, her campaign was very moderate. And I think in 2025 with Zohran Mamdani being elected, he even de-emphasized, like, he was an identitarian in like 5 years ago. People, like, the conservatives are reposting some videos where he was very woke in a lot of his terminology, but now he won big and he de-emphasized woke. So I just think that as far as like Democrats go, they're kind of trying to pretend that none of that happened.
Yeah, right. And so I think one thing you put us on to is this piece by James Carville in the New York Times from this week, I think.
Which, Alex, you're going to read in the Cajun accent.
I can't do that. I don't know. Maybe Ryan can give that a go. For those who don't know James Carville, I mean, he was behind Bill Clinton's election in 1992, and Ryan could probably tell us more about him. But he's obviously a big Democrat strategist, and he's probably the most respected of the lot of them, like among, I don't know.
Ooh, that'd be respected Democratic strategist. Yikes.
I mean, within the Democratic Party, he's big. He's still a big deal, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, for sure. He's been around. I mean, in his column, he talks about he's like 81, 82, which is crazy. But yeah, he's famous for Clinton at the time, back in 91, 92 was kind of a nobody. But Carville has taken a lot of credit for his upset victory back in 92. And he's kind of stuck around like through the Obama administration. And now he's some sort of like wise old sage of the Democratic Party. But his brand at the time was super moderate and centrist, and basically that you got to, screw the leftists, you got to talk like a Republican, but just be slightly to the left of the Republicans. So he's really changed his tune in this New York Times column.
Yeah, right. So it's called Out with Woke, In with Rage. I'm just going to quote two little sections from it. One, the era of performative woke politics from 2020 to 2024. Well, we could correct that and say, dude, 2014 to 20, but anyway, 2020 to 2024 has left a lasting stain on our brand, particularly with rural voters and male voters. The term Latinx was despised even by many Latino people. Yeah, no kidding. Calling folks BIPOC should never have been a thing. Defund the police was a terrible idea. Polling shows that nearly 70% of Americans think the Democratic Party is, quote unquote, out of touch, and that it is more interested in social issues than economic ones. And then he kind of works this through and comes to the conclusion that we should not fear that running on a platform of seismic economic scale will cost us a general election. We've already lost enough of them by being afraid to try. The era of half-baked political policy is over. Wow, maybe a leopard can change its stripes. Because this is big stuff. And what's really interesting in your UnHerd piece, Ryan, is that you kind of work through different think tanks, and of course that's telling in its own right, I guess, because this isn't exactly bubbling up from different constituencies or state parties or whatever. It's being cooked up in think tanks as different ways to respond. It's still kind of a very marketing based form of politics. Even indeed the way that James Carville talks about these things themselves is itself like, oh, we lost this segment and that segment, right, by being woke. We lost rural voters and male voters. 70% of Americans think such and such and such, right? So there's no real kind of obviously principled abandonment of these ideas, or even kind of any deeper political sense other than responding to what might and might not be popular. Nevertheless, you point out, you kind of work through these different think tanks and kind of what their proposals are for a post-woke Democratic Party, which can in some ways maybe adapt to, I don't want to say adapt to MAGA, but to adapt to a world in which MAGA is a fixture of American politics and has shown to have a hold on a certain section of the, a substantial enough section of the American population that these demands have to be responded to. So maybe we can work through these. Do you want to start with start through welcome?
Yeah, it's a cheesy name, isn't it? Welcome to the new Democratic Party. It's better than your party, though, I will say. So welcome. It's sort of these. It's almost like they're moderate populists. I mean, some of these terms now are kind of silly. Like, what is a moderate populist? Maybe nothing, but it's sort of these Democrats who are more, I'd say, socially moderate. Like, they're not going to ban gay marriage, but in terms of like things that a lot of woke people or a lot of the wokeists ran on, they're sort of de-emphasizing that. And there might be, as far as immigration goes, they might be moderate on that, as far as we don't want to deport everyone with using ICE and throw them in cages, but we don't want open borders too. But they're also talking a lot about economic issues and affordability. And as an example, there was a candidate who ran for Congress in Nebraska named Dan Osborne, who was like a union guy and sort of a Bernie guy as far as economic issues, but he's also offered to build the wall or help Trump build the wall. So he overperformed in comparison to a lot of Democrats in the 2024 election. He didn't win, but Nebraska is a super conservative state, so he did better compared to a lot of Democrats in 2024. So yeah, that is essentially what welcome is.
Right. And I mean, that seems the most novel, at least within the context of the Democratic Party since Clinton, really. Right. I mean, and certainly since Obama. And then you work through some of these other ones. There's one's called Persuasion, which I wasn't familiar with, but if I understand correctly, it's just more of the same. Different techniques.
So they didn't persuade you?
No, they didn't.
No, Persuasion is sort of like the ultra progressives. I feel like I've been saying woke too much in this episode, so I won't say it this time. Super progressive, identity politics forward groups that are basically saying that we need to refocus on young people and BIPOCs and then people in the Sun Belt, which is a term for like the southern part of the United States, and that we need to be on TikTok. Like let's have the woke Joe Rogan, essentially.
Is there any candidate for the woke Joe Rogan? I mean, who would it be?
What's his name? He's kind of woke, right? He's the podcaster that
Alex who? What? He's got that surname you can't pronounce. He's quite woke, isn't he?
Yeah, I believe so.
Not very charismatic though. That's, I guess.
Hassan.
That's a terrible combination.
Hassan Piker is
woke and not charismatic.
I guess Hassan Piker, but I guess Hassan is more of a. Well, he's like an economic leftist and a woke leftist, if you want to say it like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of the radical. I mean, tries to
the radical
left,
right?
Country. Yeah. So, and then I mean, some of the other things might be a little bit more familiar, like abundance, and which we haven't really done a dedicated episode on, but we've talked around enough. I'm sure people are familiar with it by now, where it's basically build out. This is the way to answer these economic demands. That the economic populism is not redistribution, but building out stuff, right? So if you build enough houses, prices will drop, and that'll be good for everyone.
Yeah, sort of a little bit of a deregulation, and changing laws like zoning laws, which is sort of an undersung part of American housing structure, is just, like here, if you're going to build like a house, you need a certain amount of parking, right? So like change parking codes, and it's sort of wonky, but yeah, they make a case that it is tied to affordability.
Right. And then you finally have the Roosevelt Institute, which kind of seems to be more concerned with procedural reform and kind of fixing the state rather than addressing voters directly with something that they might want.
Yeah, some of that actually got talked about, during the Biden years, is that the Democrats should do not just like the big infrastructure bill, but also like expand the Supreme Court and make Washington, D.C. its own state. So they would have 2 senators, make Puerto Rico a state, things like that that are more procedural, but that will advantage Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, all of this comes, I mean, it sounds a little bit, if I'm not kind of over-interpreting it, a little bit like something a little bit more self-confident. I mean, and that's to endorse in no way any of these particular proposals, but it all seems a little bit more like, wait, we should be a little bit bolder here. We should, we should stop kind of hiding behind the Republicans' failure or the Republicans' unpopularity, and we should try to, either become more economically populist or be really woke, but to be confident about it, or or build out and build a bunch of stuff, or really try to seize the state and try to repurpose it to our interests. I mean, those are all features, I guess, which were there in previous Democratic administrations in one way or another. But that it's coming from think tanks who are able to at least think a little bit more openly. It's kind of interesting. On the other hand, I mean, it does make me think that none of this is actually going to happen. I mean, how are we meant to kind of, how are we actually meant to read these proposals insofar as like, what does it say about kind of American politics at the moment? Because maybe I should make reference explicitly to the episode that's just come out today, was recorded yesterday. So for you, listener, you're hearing this probably on a Friday or something. So, this same week where we talked to Benjamin Studebaker, where one of his, ongoing concerns, and it's very clear in that episode, was with the sclerosis of American politics, the immobility of American politics. And that seems to be the fundamental factor at play. And so all this stuff just seems to will be ultimately about messaging. In fact, like the sort of melodramatic aspects of American politics, calling someone a fascist, calling someone a communist, whatever, is itself a reflection of the fact that no one is able to really change the grounds for anything. Is able to, gather a kind of coalition which can form a genuine majority and force through a majority in Congress to change anything. So, you just do a lot of shouting instead.
Yeah, and I think that, the danger is that a lot of this is just about messaging, right? And it could end up, I mean, people have short memories, but in 2008, Obama campaigned as an economic populist and wasn't very woke, because woke wasn't really a force in 2008, but he did not govern like one. So there is a danger that we'll still be stuck, because what we'll have is Democrats reacting, and they'll stop, talking about reparations and putting pronouns in your emails. But when it comes to governing, we'll just do more incrementalism. And it's, the way the Democrats are talking, I have not heard anything like this in, a lot of my lifetime. But is it just sort of we're really unpopular, MAGA won, we really need to rethink things. So will it change it? That is a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of like post neoliberal politics, MAGA's pushing that way, albeit in halting ways and in ways which are sometimes contradictory. Because certainly, if one understands post neoliberal to mean more state direction, not necessarily more popular or populist in any way, but certainly more kind of towards more state capitalism, then these Democrat proposals maybe in some ways capture that, in other ways don't, or kind of seeking to respond to that or not. I don't know.
Well, one thing that, it makes me think that something could change is just that because of the MAGA's realignment of the Republican Party, who votes Democrats and who votes Republicans has changed a lot in the last 10 years. And maybe this is the Democrats' moment of reconfiguration and realignment in some sense.
Realignment in terms of like continuing on the trajectory that they've gone on, or trying to reverse it somewhat?
Trying to react to a MAGA and trying to realign, like, will we become more of a working class party, or do we kind of go on our continued trajectory, which isn't looking good, right?
Yeah. And the Mamdani thing seems to just be, I mean, I kind of can't see a way in which that is very interesting. Like, no one's really convinced me that it's particularly meaningful, other than the fact that, okay, well, I mean, he won New York and he did so with a much more economically populist message. But it seems to me a lot like, well, you mentioned Obama 2008. It sounds more like that than it does like Bernie Sanders even.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. But I think, what's funny is that Democrats and Republicans sort of built up Mamdani. I mean, he's just going to be mayor of one city, but he has become like this almost global figure in just a span of a few months, I guess, showing how popular or how oversized New York City is in the imagination of everyone. But
and how few ideas there are out there as
Right.
well. Because, if European leftists can be like, oh, this is the way to win, really shows the paucity of ideas out there.
Yeah, but I do think it's true. Like, if you look at the turnout, like municipal elections, there's been such low turnout over the last 50 years. And in New York City, it was like 42% turnout, which doesn't sound maybe like a lot, but I think it's trended towards like the 20s. So
Wow.
This was the biggest turnout in New York City since like 1969. And so the Democrats are kind of are hungry for ideas on how to win, how to get people to turn out. And so like, oh, here's this cool Mamdani guy. Let's maybe imitate what he's got going on.
Anyway, I guess we'll have to keep an eye on that as we go on. But yeah, thanks, Ryan. This has been kind of interesting and kind of trying to look at where, how the Democrats are rearranging. Yeah,
you don't think New York's an important place, Alex? Do you? You think it's parochial little town in some country?
No, I just think municipal politics are boring personally to me, and I pay attention insofar as they're important, which is to say they're where I am, in my place, in my city, and maybe another city close to me, but that's about it. So, I think that's a good principle to have.
I'll tell you guys one anecdote. I just worked on a mayoral campaign here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and it was an interesting situation because Republicans basically don't exist here. And so everything was on the Democratic primary. And the candidate I was going for, that I was running media for, lost by 80 votes. And so he decided to run in the general election as a Republican. And our mayor is terrible. So he thought he had a chance. But the problem is everybody wanted to vote against Trump, even though Trump was not on the ballot in a mayoral election, that my candidate lost just because he had an R by his name. It's just like nobody is paying attention. I talked to somebody that was excited because Mamdani won in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So it's like, yeah, New York City was an unusual case in that people cared about a mayor's race, is what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. Well, we'll see. Anyway, we should move on to listener questions.
Hello, friends. You've reached the end of a sample from an episode only available to subscribers. We put out 2 episodes a month for free. For access to the rest in its entirety, please join us at patreon.com/bungacast. For $7 a month, subscribers receive original, exclusive episodes with the entirety of the BungaCast cast. That's George Hoare, myself, Alex Hochuli, and our contributing editors, Philip Cunliffe, Amber Lee Frost, Catherine Liu, Lee Jones, Alex Gurevich, and Lee Phillips. We've got extended interviews with guests, episodes on current affairs, and original episodes on theory, history, and culture, so as to understand the crises of our times. We also have the BungaCast Reading Club, where Phil, George, and myself present the key books and essays necessary for understanding the world today, how we got here, and where we might be going. Subscribers also get a digital subscription to Damage magazine, with whom we're partnered, and you can find all this info at patreon.com/bungacast. We do hope you'll join us. These are turbulent times, and ideologically confused ones as well. What we try to do is find political clarity, to move beyond the decadent age of bunga bunga.
Buenos Aires,